Okay, so before I forget, announcement for those who have not already registered this on their schedule. All of my shiurim will be on hiatus for the last 2 weeks of January, so this shiur will not be scheduled to meet until February. I'll obviously announce it then. Okay, so we have a mission today. We have 45 minutes. Well, we have 43 minutes. Our mission is, because this is going to be the last year before the break, then I would like to try to wrap this up. Okay. Obviously, we're not going to answer all the questions, but what our goal is going to be is to answer Adler's 4 questions. This is from the methodology here. The methodology here that I gave before. What is the parak saying as a whole? Meaning, what's the theme or subject or the main idea and message in like a sentence? 2, what is the parak saying in detail and how? What do the individual pesukim mean? Why are the pesukim ordered in this manner? Why did he say these things in this way? That's the least of our priorities. Question number 2. That's, if we have time, we'll just do as much of the details as possible. 3, is the parak true in whole or in part? Meaning to the satisfaction of our own minds. Obviously, we hold that it's true by virtue of the fact that it's in Tanakh, but are we convinced? And then 4, what of it? What's the purpose of this? What effect is this supposed to have on us? How are we supposed to change our lives or our relationship with Hashem based on this? And that's going to be the second priority question. So we're prioritizing it. Question 1, then 4, then 3, and 2 are like trailing behind. Without rereading the entire parak, let's just refresh our memories here. I ended up just taking out the green on 7 and 8 and just made the dividing line much cleaner here. So 2 through 7 is 1, which has to do with David HaMelech in his state of suffering, asking Hashem for healing and for assistance. And then 8 through 11 is telling his tormentors that Hashem has responded to his prayer, or Hashem will accept his prayer. And so we did not really get a satisfying unification of that. Last time, what we focused on really was pasuk number 2. So I wanted to review that. And I wanted to clarify that, and then we'll tackle the Adler's 4 questions. So Hashem, do not rebuke me in your anger. Do not chastise me in your wrath. We said, based on the Rebuke, so the Rebuke said actually that, what does it mean, do not rebuke me in your anger? So first of all, he's framing his sickness as a rebuke. And what we said last time is that's true. Either this is a rebuke from Hashgacha via Hashgacha Pratis, that God is specifically intervening to rebuke him because he's on the level, in the same way that he would send Tzara'as to afflict Miriam, or a plague to affect Avimelech, in order to clue them in on the fact that they need to do tshuva for something in a specific way. Or the fact that David Melech is sick means that he doesn't warrant the level of Hashgacha to be protected, and Hashem is withdrawing, is hiding his face, and that also warrants tshuva. It's not a specific directed like message in an envelope tshuva, but it is a general thing that if David Melech were on a certain level, then he would not receive this suffering. So that's where David Melech is saying, he's acknowledging that it's tochacha, that it's rebuke, but then he's saying, don't rebuke me in your wrath, and what that means is more than I can tolerate. Kadesh uchal lisbol. That I can tolerate this. So the question that was asked to me was by Mayan. Sorry. Before we said this, so we said last time, why do we phrase this as Hashem's anger, and what are we supposed to make of it? So we said that really, obviously, we don't take anger literally because Hashem doesn't have emotions. But the question is, do we just throw away the mashal once we decode it? Like, are these mashalim only for people who are on on the level where they need to relate to God through imagery and in human metaphors, but people like David don't need to? Or is there some level at which David can relate to it? So what we said was the second way, which is that it's not enough to know something in our minds, because if you just know it in your mind and you let your emotions just do their thing, they will not be in line with your knowledge. And you are one organism. You are a rational animal, and we want knowledge of Hashem should move the entire organism. So you first have to get the idea clear with your mind, but then you have to say it and convey it to the emotions in their language, which is in sensory, in mashal form, in appealing to their imagination, focusing on the particulars. So when we read this, if we're in David HaMelech's situation and we're sick, we recognize intellectually that this is as a result of our relationship to Hashem and that we should do tshuva, but we also emotionally relate to it as though Hashem is angry, because emotionally that's what we need to feel. When someone is angry at you, then the healthy response is, I did something wrong and I need to make this right. That's the feeling that we should have when we talk about when we talk about Hashem's anger towards us. Okay. Any just questions on that before we go to Mayan's question, and then before we go to the 4 questions? A lot of questions flying. Okay.
I guess I do have a question. How it seems kind of strange to make your emotions relate to something that's not true. Like normally I would think you would want your emotions to be related to true things. So if it's not true that God has emotions, then
right.
It's kind of
funny.
So
here's the thing. I mean, I think there's 2 ways to look at this. Okay, conceptually there's 2 approaches here. Okay, either what we're doing, either the plan I just laid out is attempting to get the emotions to the truest thing possible, or the most accurate thing, or the least inaccurate thing. Okay, and that's the best that you can do. Or there is a mode in which, I'm going to say this without knowing what I mean, where truth value to the emotions is different than truth value to the mind. Okay, let's leave that aside for a second. Let me explain the first part. For example, the question is often asked like by students. They ask this question because they speak English, but this question is not going to apply in Hebrew. But they ask me, if Hashem doesn't have a gender, because gender is a biological quality, so then why do we refer to Hashem as he as opposed to it? And the answer to that is that it, so from a strictly strictly speaking, it would remove the idea of gender, and therefore you would not relate to Hashem through a gender. So you can argue that that's more accurate. However, emotionally, if you refer to Hashem as an it, so then you're going to relate to him as an object or as something inanimate, or something that you're going to be in that relationship that you are the person and he is the thing. And that is going to emotionally put you into a position where you feel superior to him, So it's more accurate in the perspective of the emotions to relate to God as a being, even though that forces us to choose genders, than it would be than if we spoke about Hashem as an it. Similarly, like we saw, I don't know what year this was in, but we don't have any positive notion of God, of God's oneness or his existence. So when we say God exists, we really just mean that the opposite of non-existence. But the thing is for the emotions, relating to God as an existence is more accurate than relating to God as though he doesn't exist, because with existence, we're like I think this is the who says this? I think this is Sefer Karim says, let's just take God as the creator. Only beings who exist can do actions, and we definitely relate to God's actions. So what's more accurate in terms of the way we mentally shape our view of God? That actions are coming from nothing, or actions are coming from an existing being. So obviously it's coming from an existing being. And even though the only existence we know is physical existence, and in that sense it's inaccurate, it's more accurate for us to relate to God that way. So we're getting our emotions as close as possible, even though we actually can't bridge that gap because our emotions only relate to the physical and God's non-physical. So that's one answer. Does that make sense, Ev?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. The other answer, I don't know what I meant. So I just said it. I feel like there's an intuition there, but I don't want to spend time talking about it right now. And we'll go with the answer that works right now. Okay. So Mayan had a question after last time when we talked about Hashem's anger, which said, I had a follow-up from tonight's Tehilim shiur. If David's aim is to change himself, I feel like pleading for God to change his plan isn't focusing on his own actions or mindset needing to change, but rather focusing on God's. It's almost like putting the responsibility on God to act. And what she means is, and Mayan, you can jump in yourself if you mean something other than what I said. Hashem, do not rebuke me in your anger, nor chastise me in your wrath. So if you just look at the statement, David is asking Hashem to change. He's not asking for himself to change. So the question is why is he asking it? And also, be gracious unto me, Hashem, for I am feeble. Heal me, Hashem, for my bones shudder with terror. Desist, Hashem, release my soul. Right. So the emphasis is on asking Hashem to change. So how is that appropriate given what we said that really he's trying to change himself? Would anyone like to try to answer that question?
Can I further the question?
Yes, that's also an option.
How is it even okay or possible to ask Hashem to change if we know as like
Right.
a fact Hashem just doesn't change.
Right.
So asking Hashem to change just seems like foolishness.
Okay, good. So without answering the question myself, that was the first part of my answer. So I was driving somewhere, or I was doing something. So I said first, good question. I have to think about that more, but I suspect the answer lies in how asking Hashem for non-angry punishment changes the way David relates to his illness and the tshuva he would do. So that's the first step, is somehow asking Hashem to change. Since we know Hashem can't change, then when we ask Hashem to change, we're really doing that as a way of getting ourselves to change. And now the question is how, especially given the language. Again, the language is definitely putting the focus on Hashem changing. Anyone else have an answer? I don't have an answer, but I can read the answer I gave Mayan. I trust myself then when she asked me this question on Thursday night, so it was very fresh in my mind. So let's see what I said. I said, here's an analogy. If you're going to an authority figure to ask for mercy and being punished for an offense, and you say, I know what I did was really bad and I don't deserve special treatment, but I'm begging you to take it easy on me for XYZ reasons. It's true that you're appealing to that authority to change their behavior, but you're also forcing yourself to face the severity of your own offense and recognizing what true justice would dictate. That's how David's plea affects change in himself, despite being a request for divine mercy. So when he says to Hashem, Hashem, do not rebuke me in your anger, he's saying, like the Rebuke explicitly says, for Leman Chasdecha, hold on, where was that? Leman Chasdecha. That is a phrase in this Tehilim, isn't it? Leman, wait, did I just type something? Yeah, hold on. Leman Chasdecha. Did he not? I'm not finding this. He says somewhere here, not because of my righteousness. The Rebuke, I know that he used that phrase. Oh, here we go. It's Hoshein Leman Chasdecha, Lo B'tzikasi ki yadati ki ani chayav. So so when he says Hashem, don't rebuke me in your wrath, he's acknowledging that I deserve a rebuke in full wrath because of what I did. But I'm recognizing that I don't deserve mercy. And that recognition changes David. And same thing when he's giving these, when he says, save me so that I can, where is it? For in death, there's no mention of you in the grave, who will gratefully acknowledge you. So it sounds like he's just trying to give Hashem reasons to persuade him. Obviously, Hashem knows all these reasons. He's really saying this to Hashem in order to make it real to himself that the reason why I'm asking to be saved is not just so I can go party, but so that I can be involved in pursuing knowledge of you, So it's for himself. And the reason, now you can ask me one step further, you can say, well, why does he phrase it still? Why is he even phrasing it at all about Hashem? So I think this is because he has to recognize, and this is an important point, that David HaMelech has no control, that it's all in Hashem's hands. So that's asking Hashem, so in other words, there's two things. It's recognizing that this is all from Chesed Hashem and mercy, and David doesn't deserve it, and it's all in Hashem's hands. It's David relinquishing control and relinquishing security in his own efforts. And again, this is a perfect example of what we just talked about, of speaking in ways that the emotions will relate to. Like you can say like I don't control things, and that's that intellectually might be clear. But when you say, Hashem, I'm throwing myself at your mercy, please save me, it's putting yourself into the mindset where you're realizing it's not up to me, it's up to Hashem. It's getting your emotions in line with that recognition.
Can I try to draw a connection here?
Yeah.
That also might help. So I was thinking this really sounds like how Ramban explains korbanos, and how he says, you really have to recognize that the animal is really supposed to be you, and that you are getting mercy. And it also, I was like, wait, and on top of that, we know that korbanos were used before tefillah as tefillah.
That's not according to the Rambam. Rambam holds
No,
that.
wasn't that Ramban?
I don't know about what the Ramban holds, but Rambam definitely doesn't hold that. I thought you said
Yeah.
Rambam. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. I want to find something. Hold on just a second here. Rambam on Korbanos, because it's more than just that. You're correct, by the way, but it's more than just that. If you look at the Rambam and obviously this is not the time to go into the whole thing about the Rambam on Korbanos, but basic idea, right, is that Rambam holds that Korbanos really are not ideal, and that Hashem only tolerated them, so to speak, and incorporated them into Torah because that was the primary mode of worship. And if he didn't allow for that in Torah, then Klal Yisrael would go to Avodah Zarah, So he says something very, very sneaky in here. He says like this: therefore, his wisdom and plan, this is in the Nebuchim 3:32. Actually, let's go back up one paragraph. Now, Hashem sent Moshe to make the Israelites into a kingdom of priests and a holy nation through our knowledge of God, and we should devote ourselves to his service. But the universal practice in those days and the general mode of worship to which they were accustomed consisted in sacrificing animals in those temples which contained certain idols and bowing down to them and burning incense before them. The pious and priestly individuals were in those days the persons who were devoted to the service in the temples built for the planets, as we've explained. Okay, therefore, his wisdom and plan, as displayed throughout the entirety of creation, did not require the discontinuation, abandonment, and abolition of all these forms of service, because this would have been contrary to the nature of man, who clings to what he's accustomed. It would have in those days made the same impression as a prophet would make at present if he called us to the service of Hashem and told us in his name that we should not pray to him, not fast, and not seek his help in times of trouble, but that we should serve him in thought alone without any actions at all. Okay, now, Rambam is speaking on two levels. To the average reader, you're just going to use this as a mushal, okay? Meaning, yeah, can you imagine if Hashem went to a shul of Jews who were in most of our Jewish history, where we have all of these problems and like we're being attacked from all over the place, and the Navi said, "Hey guys, stop praying to Hashem, just stop asking." It would feel like Hashem took away their primary means of relating to him. Okay, but on the deeper level, he's saying, according to my understanding here, is in the same way that really the essence of korbanos themselves are not necessary per se, right? You should really, the ideal, the perfected human being should be able to serve Hashem without the need of like these symbolic actions, but God had to cater to human nature because that's the best way to get humanity in line with perfection. So too, tefillah is not strictly speaking necessary for a person on a higher level. Okay. Really, Moshe Rabbeinu did not need to daven. He could just he could just serve God in thought alone. Okay. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't need to fast. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't need to seek his help in times of trouble. Okay. Through like tefillah and all those things. Moshe could just relate to God in thought per se. But we who are not on that level, and by the way, the proof, at least in terms of tefillah, is, I mean, I don't know if this is a proof, but it certainly is a indication that tefillah is dispensable, is the halacha of Torah u'manaso, that if you are on the high enough level of learning Torah, which we don't have nowadays, then you're putter from tefillah, entirely. And so your entire avodah, your only avodah shebelev would be avodah shebelev of Talmud Torah, not avodah shebelev of tefillah. So the thing is that, so like what Rebuke is saying though, we can't relate to God in thought alone. We need to harness all of the emotional faculties at our disposal. We need to bow to God, because we standing upright and not doing a physical posture, which makes us subordinate, we wouldn't be able to fully subordinate ourselves to God if we didn't do that physically. We need to speak because thinking in our minds is different than speaking. So we need to speak because it makes it more real to our emotions. We need to address God in the second person, and because that brings to mind the idea of God's like absolute existence, that he is, so to speak, present, and we can't just think it. So like all these things we need for emotional reasons. So Rivki, you were more right than you thought, because the Rambam actually mentions tefillah.
Question.
Yeah.
I guess this is a totally different topic, and you can punt if you want, but
okay,
it's sort of related. But how is tefillah different than all the other mitzvos? That like the avos, let's say, didn't need mitzvos necessarily.
Yeah.
So how is that different?
Yeah, let's table that for now. Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, good question. I don't even know the answer to that one. I'll have to think about it, but it is a good question. Okay, let's go back to our Tehilim now. Okay, and let's try to tackle Adler's 4 questions. So again, we're prioritizing questions 1 and 4 right now. Okay, so what if you had to summarize the main idea of this parak? What would it be? And again, saying the theme is okay. Like you can say the theme is blank, but we want at least a full sentence. Okay. And this is where we need to do the work of unifying it, because I feel like we still didn't unify the 2 halves. Isaac had a half approach last time of like that the enemies are not relating to Hashem properly. David himself is saying, I want to be healed so that I can acknowledge you and mention you, whereas these enemies aren't doing that. And I kind of was not inclined to that approach because it doesn't talk about the enemies being Rasha'im. Like when we did chapter 36, that was really talking about how the enemies were the opposite of David in their relationship to Hashem, or at least the Rebuke said that, but here not so much. Oh, and by the way, I don't have answers. Okay, so like don't wait for me. All right, so we're figuring this out now.
Can I take a stab at the main idea?
Please
Number
do.
1.
Yeah, I'm just switching these.
So this might be going afield a little bit, but maybe like David is saying to himself that he should recognize the severity and the destructive nature of his actions, and that the only way to differentiate himself from his enemies who don't recognize Hashem is to recognize that severity and pull away from it.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, that I like, and I'll tell you why. Because he's saying, hold on. Hold on. There is like this implicit thing here that the enemies are not recognizing the fact that Hashem will respond to David. Because he's saying, depart from me, all evildoers, for Hashem has heard the sound of my weeping. So they're apparently under the impression that Hashem has not heard the sound of his weeping, and therefore they don't depart, and somehow when they realize that Hashem has heard his plea and accepted his prayer, then they'll all be shamed and confounded and they'll regret their actions. So say what you said again, Isaiah, because something what you said like highlighted that for me.
I think so. I'm saying David in the first part is recognizing the destructive and harmful nature of his actions and the way he relates to Hashem. And in the second part, he's telling himself that he needs to recognize that the only way he can differentiate himself from his enemies, who clearly, I guess, don't recognize Hashem, is to realize what he's doing is wrong.
Okay, yeah. I think I also like that because it does incorporate that into the Tochacha. But this raises another question, though. Why is he not viewing... So he's viewing his illness as a result of Hashem's anger at him. Why is he not viewing his enemies as a result of Hashem's anger at him? Like he talks about them as though they're an external thing. And we do know that the enemies are a form of Hashem's anger, because in the Tochacha, in the Torah, in both of them, then being victimized by our enemies is one of the ways that Hashem rebukes the nation. You could argue maybe the nation is different than the individual, but I don't see why it shouldn't be, especially if we're talking about Hester Panim, where Hashem hides his hashgacha and leaves David victim to everyone. That's the in fact, I'll bring a raya from David's son Shlomo HaMelech, that Shlomo HaMelech, when he did his chait, Hashem had been holding back Shlomo's enemies, and then he says that once Shlomo did that, then he let the enemies free. And then they harmed him, like he withdrew the protection. So like that clearly is a thing.
How are you seeing that this is not part of the punishment? Like it seems like to me like it could be.
Well, he's not talking about it as though it's part of the punishment. He's saying he's not. Okay, you could say that in 8. I'll be willing to grant that in 8 is you could say that as part of the punishment. But in 9, he's saying it's as a result of God accepting his tshuva and his tefillah. then the enemies will go away.
Right. So doesn't that mean that it could be that the enemies were correlated to Hashem not accepting his tefillah?
Okay, so that's true, but he's also like trying to shove it in their face, it seems. Right? Now you could say you could come up with another reason why he does that, like let them be shamed and confounded and regret. Like it makes it more about them than like it'd be like if he said for the for the first part, like take that coronavirus, or whatever disease he was suffering from. So that to me suggests that there's something else going on with the enemies here.
I think I'm thinking of it a little bit differently. It's more like his enemies. He's experiencing anger at his enemies because of the state that he's in, not as an effect of the punishment that he's receiving.
Okay. Yeah, and Rebuke did say that, right? Because he said that his enemies are, how are they tormenting him? That that they rejoice at his illness. Yeah. See, yeah, there's got to be connection there also, because the fact that they're rejoicing at his illness is part of the suffering, like you just said. Yeah.
There's also the flip, right, of Bahala and Yivasha, right, that he has it, and then the Vinafshin Evalamod, and then in the end you have it, they're going to be of the issue of the Yavala.
Right. So that's a good point. That is so he is Nivhalu here. His bones are terrified and his soul is terrified. And then at the flip side, then they're going to be terrified. Yeah. I was also toying with an idea here. I don't know if this is reading too much into it. I'd noticed that, hold on. Nah, too speculative.
This might also be speculative, but
yeah,
it kind of seems like in the first part, he's his goal, or at least some of his goal, is so that he can do maybe like Kiddush Hashem or something like that, acknowledge Hashem. So maybe part of what's bothering him is that him being down and the way that his enemies are, I don't know, talking about things is some sort of Chil Hashem.
I hear that. Yeah, I mean, it does kind of sound like a Kiddush Hashem type argument here with 10 and 11, that like once Hashem saves him, that will put his enemies to shame. They'll realize that God relates to him and accept his prayer. Yeah, I hear that. I don't think that's so speculative. So maybe let's do this then. Let's try to get, I mean, I know that's what we're trying to do right now, to unify the thing, but like, can we just maybe say what we have from the Perek, ignoring the specific question of how to unify and tie in the last couple of pesukim, and then maybe if we get the main idea clear enough, then that'll trickle down into like it'll explain how we see everything else. So what is the main idea, or what is the Perek trying to do?
Is it like trying to get us to recognize how Hashem works within the bounds of like not just punishment, but also like, I guess, our view of how he interacts with us on that level? Yeah,
but I think in a specific scenario, of sickness. Yeah. I mean, going again. I'm kind of taking the Rebuke's lead here. So it's either about David's sickness or it's about anyone who's sick, and then David says his thing, and then at the end, when he says Hashem has heard my plea and he's accepted my tefillah, he says bezos ha'es u'b'chol. Oh no, sorry, that's not the part I meant. Ki shema Hashem kol bichi. Hashem has heard my cry. Bichiyusi michalio. Amar said when he recovered from his illness, he said this. O bicholio, or when he's in his illness. Umedaber al ha'azi b'ruach hakodesh, and he's speaking about the future in with the ruach hakodesh. Here's the part. V'chol adam chole hamispalel Anyone who's sick can say this if he davens with a broken and and crushed heart. So that's an interesting thing. So hold on, let's focus on that. If you're saying this, you're going through two phases. You're going through the phase of recognizing how liable you are and how this is a tochacha and how Hashem could give you what you deserve, but he's not, and realizing why you are asking to be healed, which is so you can remember Hashem. And then based on that, you're affirming the fact that God has heard my prayer, meaning that someone who actually has this recognition, then God has heard their prayer. And in other words, like, it bolsters your conviction in both the mechanism of tefillah, that's like the first half, like what this tefillah, how you're supposed to daven when you're sick, and in the reality of the tefillah. Now, again, when I say the reality of the tefillah, I don't mean that every single person who davens who's sick, then Hashem heals. That's clearly not true, right? So it doesn't, when you say Hashem has heard my prayer, like there are people who die of illness in great tzaddikim, so it's not like a guarantee in that sense, but it means that like this is the type of tefillah that registers in Hashem's value system. That's what it means that he accepts it, and that all you're trying to do is to be the type of person whose tefillah Hashem hears. That's what you're really trying to see. Maybe that's better. Okay, that's good. That's a good phrase. Okay, when you daven, the result is not in your hand. Obviously, you're davening for a result, but your goal in davening, just like your goal in a decision. Okay, let's go Mishlei for a second. Just like your goal in a decision in Mishlei, your goal is not to get the result. That's not in your hands. Your goal is to make the best decision that you can, given the knowledge and given the control that you have. So too in tefillah, your goal is not to get healed. You can't control that, and you might not get healed. There might be many reasons why you can't get healed. Your goal is to daven in a way where you are the type of person whose tefillah God listens to, and that's good no matter what. That's something that is a worthwhile goal no matter what, and is something that regardless of whether God heals you, you are baraton, be'enav, like you are in viewed favorably in God's eyes, and if it's your time to go, it's your time to go. I mean, Yaakov Avinu got sick and died, a few parshios ago, he lived in line with Hashem's will, but the goal is to live in line with Hashem's will. And if you're sick, to use that as a tochacha, and to use this as a means, the tshuva and the tefillah as a means of rendering yourself into a person whose tefillah is listened to by Hashem. That's both the main idea and the purpose of it.
I have a question so then sickness in general. So I know like a lot of people have been saying, I think we had a shiur about this like a while ago, that like we should be using Corona as a way to really look at ourselves and see what we've been doing wrong and what we can improve on. Yes. So every single time we get sick, are we supposed to be viewing it as, even if it's like the smallest thing as a cold, so we should be viewing it like how David is, even though it's probably like a more intense. 100%. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that goes back to what we said, what we reviewed at the beginning of the shiur is like, like if you're sick, like either it is, a specific like hashgacha pratis, rebuke, targeted rebuke, or it's a hester panim, a God hiding his face type of hashgacha withdrawal, or if you're in a plague, it could be a chait of the nation and you're part of the nation, and you have to reflect on that. Like there have been times also in Jewish history where you have great tzaddikim who themselves don't deserve things, but then once God unleashes the plague, it's unleashed. That's a principle of plagues, and so that also merits this type of tshuva.
Why is this specifically to sickness? Because isn't that like true of all things that happen to you?
Yeah,
like
but
and such.
That's like asking a question again. That's like going back to the purpose of Tehilim is for the emotions, right? That's like that question is like asking, let's say in Mishlei, you have a pasuk that's about a person who acts based on greed and like makes a bad decision because he was blinded. So you could say, isn't that true of all emotions, that all emotions blind you? The answer is yes, but stating this in the universal is not going to help you. So there's a Tehilim for being sick. There's a Tehilim for being oppressed by your enemies. There's a Tehilim for feeling outcast. There's a Tehilim for, like, you know, when your plans don't work. You need to work through the ideas and the emotions together in each particular scenario, and it has to be done in particular for the sake of the emotions.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is interesting that it's slightly different than Mishle in that way, and that like you're actually supposed to like read this when you're going through that situation.
Right, exactly. That's the I think I brought this up in the let me stop sharing for 1 second. I think I brought this up in the How to Learn Tehilim shiur. In fact, we'll find out because I'll open the PowerPoint again. The Sefer HaChinuch that hold on. Sefer HaChinuch said this is the idea of what it means. Like who did I hear say this? Heard this in a shiur. Like, there's no idea of saying Mishle. I'm gonna go recite some Mishle, you know. But Tehilim is Chazal mentioned to say these psalms since they contain words that inspire the soul that knows them to shelter in Hashem, to place all of one's security in Him, to establish a fear of Him firmly in his heart, and to rely on His kindness and goodness. As a result of this inspiration, he will be protected from every harm without a doubt. Ignore that last line for a second, because there's a different meaning of what that is, because that sounds like he's saying he's going to be like protected 100%, and I just said that that's not true. I think we have to leave that for another shiur. But my point is this part though, is that you're saying them in order to inspire your soul, you know, which means both the knowledge and the emotions. Okay, back to the Tehilim. So is that a good statement of the idea? Main idea being that this parak is about how we should use sickness as a means of reflecting on our actions and our liability, and the fact that only by God's mercy do we live, and only God is in control of everything that happens. And by asking God to alleviate our situation for His name's sake, we are rendering ourselves into someone who is worthy of His of having our tefillah heard, which is the most we can expect from any of our tefillos. You can't choose whether God answers your tefillah, but you can choose whether God hears your tefillah by making it right. And that's why we say these absolute statements, Karov Hashem l'chol korav l'chol asher yikra'uhu ve'emes, that God is close to all who called Him, to all who called Him in truth. That's true. Is if you called God in truth with the right ideas and the right emotions, then God is close to you. That doesn't mean He's going to save you. God doesn't save everyone who's close to Him. In fact, I was just thinking this from our tefillah here last night. Not enough of you were close to God and they got killed. You know, like bikrovai kadesh. You know, but whatever. That's a separate idea. Yeah. So I think that's a good 1-sentence summary of the main idea. I said it. I can't repeat it. You can listen to the recording. Okay. And then the purpose of this is to actually get us to relate to illness that way. You know. And to actually like enact this. Here the purpose is very tied to the subject. Sometimes the purpose is not so tied to the subject. Sometimes the subject is like a very like abstract idea, and the purpose is something that is some other thing. Here it's very close. Really quick thing, by the way. I know we didn't finish all the questions yet. Does this shed insight into why or into how we're supposed to think of this as part of Ashkenazic Tachanun? I think it is kind of clear. Not the sickness part, but I think the recognizing our liability and our utter dependence on Hashem, that's the very idea of Tachanun. You know, Tachanunim are things that you ask for. Tefillah, you stand before God and you place your requests like someone standing before the king. Tachanunim is you're laying yourself at the mercy of God and realizing I don't deserve anything. You know, I'm totally not deserving because I'm liable.
Understand, guys?
Yeah.
Just in terms of the enemy issue, it seems like actually the enemy is really a new concept in the last pasuk, because the evildoers and tormentors seem to be the suffering and the sickness that he's facing.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, you could say that. You could say that. I think maybe I got it this way because of the Rebuke, I think. Not that you have to do this, but or I just projected. Hold on, let's see. Yeah,
also, they're getting
I got it
shamed,
from,
aren't they?
Say again?
They're getting shamed, aren't they? That
Yeah, well,
sicknesses
Donnie's
don't
saying
get
that
shamed.
Donnie's saying that the only enemies are the in the last pasuk, but he's saying that the Sora that's where they're getting shamed. But Sorarai could be the illness itself.
And the poly of it. Right?
Yeah. So the reason why I said that Sorarai is the enemies is because that's what the Rebuke says. Is he says in Ches that which is about B'chol Sorarai is al oivai hasmechim l'chol, or that's the implication at least because he says that's the anger. I hear the read though, and like the Rambam says in Hilos Tinios, al hatzar eschem, on the enemy that afflicts you, and he says that the enemy there. Let me make sure I'm not making up a Rambam. Hold on here. In Zmanim, Hilos Tinios, in Perak Aleph, Halacha Aleph, he says, boop, boop, al-hatzar hatzor eschem v'hara'os and b'chatotros, on the tormentor who torments you, then you should sound the trumpets. Klomer kol davar sheyitzar lachem, anything that afflicts you. Kagon batsores, like drought, v'dever, plague, arbe, locust, v'giotza behen. So the in the pasuk, hatzar hatzor eschem is plain shot is that it's the actual enemy, like people. But the Rambam is saying that hatzar hatzor could refer to like anything that afflicts you. So yeah, that read works out. Still have to explain why he's talking about the enemies being shamed in the end, but it makes the other part smoother at least.
He starts out because his initial reaction before acknowledging the reality is shame and frustration and being flustered, and then he's going through this transformative sort of process and recognition, which is both allowing him to be mitigate against some of the experience of the suffering and affliction, and at the same time, those who don't want him to succeed, those who he is competing against, those who are his external adversaries, are also get frustrated by that growth and that transition.
Yeah, see, to me, it still feels. This is my feeling of the understanding right now. Still, it feels like a separate idea grafted onto this parak, which would have done would have done well without it. So I feel like it has to be adding something substantial to the idea that I'm not seeing. Like I do see the flip and everything like that, but I feel like if we just deleted that part, then it would be a nice parak. All right, so I think this has to be the end of shiur for now. I'm not saying that we're not going to go back to this when we get back, but most likely just predicting my mood, unless I have some sort of breakthrough over the break, I'll probably want to start a new parak because it'll be 2 weeks from now, 2.5 weeks from now. So look, thankfully, this is one that we say from time to time, so this won't be the only time you think about it, hopefully. So if you think about more stuff, then let me know, because there's still more problems to work on here. All righty.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you.